Hi, I'm just waiting to make sure my streaming software works. It says waiting for stream. I've noticed that in the past that it does kick in sooner than it shows up, but I don't want to start reading until I know it's working. Anyway, we're got daylight savings time, so people should be a little more rested. And there's an election, which I'm not going to get into. So people are a little bit on edge. So why not just, escape into my book? So, it's just not showing up yet. So I want to make sure it's working. Still saying waiting for stream. Here we go. It is working. It just was being persnickety. So, chapter 24, we last left Helena, for once, happy. I have, it's just the way I saw it. I wrote this book, and basically the characters, I just interpreted the characters. I had the germ of the idea, and the way I write what they call organic writing. I think I've talked about this, and that it is the characters write the book. So Attila came along. He was kind of interesting. Not the romantic lead, as we noticed, but he's not a good guy, but I saw him as very smart. And Valamir, he's extremely, he's very good guy. And Helena, she has a possibility of a life here. So chapter 24, Helena awoke to Valamir's eyes watching her. As he kissed her, his hand gently explored her body. Her mouth yielded to his tongue as they merged, moving as one in the timeless dance of love. And giving herself to him, she felt complete, no longer rudderless and drifting without purpose. She clung to him, returning his fervent embrace, and shared his ecstasy. When their passion was exhausted, Valamir raised himself on one elbow and smiled. Embarrassed, she blushed. He leaned over her, allowing her no place to hide her eyes. I love you, Helena, as my wife. I wish that we could stay together all day alone like this. We must rise and face the morning. His lips met hers, but did not linger. Yet his arms did not release her. Holding her against his chest, alarmed, she remembered yesterday's wound. I have to look at your cut, only if you give me one more kiss. I don't negotiate kisses, Valamir, she said, laughing. Without a pause, his lips merged with hers, sweet with emotion. Under his caressing hands, she moaned. Attila can wait, Valamir said. Their bodies reunited in harmony as if they had known each other a lifetime. Between waves of euphoria, Helena whispered, I love you, Valamir, and I you. But his body answered her more completely than his words ever could. Afterward, they disengaged, almost as if they were afraid to linger in each other's arms. Now let me see your wound, Helena demanded again, smiling. As she touched him, her heart raced. With discipline, she concentrated on the laceration. It had bled clean, but needed the protection of a bandage. She inhaled his scent, wanting to be with him in their private place, and dared not meet his eyes. Krajapan will have herbs to help it heal, she said. Valamir reached for her. Please don't, she said. I have no resistance to you. Just one more kiss, Helena. No, she said with a laugh. That's what you said last time. And here we are, still in bed, with the camp awake all around us. A corner of his mouth turned down. I don't care. Her heart opened as she understood his desire for her had superseded his call to duty. Just hold me a little while longer, she said. Then we'll greet the day. He pulled her to his lap. Helena broke the silence, not from discomfort, but because she wanted him to know her mind. I never thought that being with a man could be like that. His eyes twinkled mischievously. Like what? Again she blushed self-consciously, but persevered, not wanting to be susceptible to his teasing. So pleasurable, she whispered to the ground. He answered her with an ardent kiss. She continued, needing to resolve a lingering shame. I wish I'd come to you a virgin, Valamir. Don't say that. I was the first man you gave yourself too freely, of your own will. Who are we to argue with how the gods join our lives? Had Caspar sent you back to Constantinople, I would never have known you. I only wished you hadn't suffered. If anyone tries to hurt you again, Helena, I promise your life will be forfeited to me. She answered him with a passionate kiss. When Ishiite called from outside, Helena jumped. Valamir, are you there? He shouted. Yes, came the retort. Oh, Ishiite said, pausing to collect his thoughts. Attila wants you. He requests your wife. He needs her to translate. Helena looked at Valamir with agitation. Don't wait, Ishiite. We'll be long soon, he said. As you said. As you wish, but you know how he is when he has an idea. Valamir chuckled. Off with you. Her throat tight with distress, she searched Valamir's face with her eyes. Helena, he said slowly, considering his words, we took 2 prisoners, a woman and a child. They are Persian. Besides Karatapan, you're the only one who speaks the language. Attila delights in goading him. If Karatapan reacts badly, Attila could punish him for disrespect, even to the point of ordering his death, and I could do nothing to prevent it. Though I prefer to keep you from Attila's sight, you are safe with him. In his peculiar way, he cares for you. Valamir stood and offered his hand. She did not want to go, but reached for him, modestly covering herself with a blanket. Valamir caught her in his arms. Until tonight, Helena. His arms enveloped her, and she relaxed. I want to stay here with you. He stroked her hair. Before you know it, we'll be alone again. Breaking away, he dressed. He held up his bloody tunic as if deciding whether to wear it. He glanced at her with a raised eyebrow. She shook her head once, firmly. I'll wash it for you, Valamir. With a private smile, he chose another garment. When they were both presentable, Valamir guided her into the cold sunlight. The aroma of meat across the fire greeted them, drifting in the wind. As they ate, Karatapan chastised them about not seeing to Valamir's injuries, but not harshly, and smiled at what he saw in their faces. He tended Valamir's wound unobtrusively and bandaged it securely with clean cloths. Ride with me, Helena, Valamir said. But all she wanted was his lips pressed on her mouth, his body one with hers. Once Rhys led Hassan to Valamir, he relinquished the reins. Rather pointedly, Rhys's eyes were cast down. He would not look at them. Unlike Karatapan, Rhys struck a discordant chord, like a sour note in a perfect song. Yet her quiet joy was not easily dampened. She overlooked his sullen mood. Nodding curtly, Valamir dismissed the Gaul. I'll ride behind you, Helena said. I don't want any pressure on your shoulder. He whispered in her ear, his breath caressing her neck. It's only a scratch, Helena. I'll miss you in my arms. But I want to be able to hold you, she said, her eyes meeting his, her cheeks warm. He moved closer and touched her brow, brushing her hair back with his hand. Until later. She breathed the aroma of his skin. His blue eyes were so close to hers as she studied the way his straight nose met his eyebrows. The camp seemed far away. He broke the moment by placing her astride Hassan, then mounting lithely in front. She clasped her arms around his waist, holding him as the stallion carried them through the camp at a gallop. Helena felt elated, a rhythm to the beat of the horse's gait, in harmony with its master. When they reached Attila's quarters, a Hun reached for the roan's reins. He was bulky, and his torso was wide. His glance at Valamir was mingled with awe. Dismounting, the Goth turned to the man. Be careful of his hoofs. He uses them as a weapon. The man eyed Hassan warily with a creased brow. As Valamir lifted down, he spoke in Greek. Hassan doesn't suffer fools gladly. Most people know that. He'll be treated with respect, which is all I want. Arm's length, they walked briskly toward the large main tent. Lena glanced at his face, her heart full, and smiled. Attila emerged from his quarters, glowering with impatience. His greeting was a frown. His foul humor did not affect Helena's exhilaration. Her joy was like a bird with wings, soaring in the air currents. She broadened her smile to include the Hun. He scowled. Turning his back on him, he walked inside. Now I see what took you two so long. They followed him. Helena felt awkward, not wanting the world to know her private happiness. Confronted by Attila, sitting directly on his chair. She had no time to regain her composure. He was withdrawn and pensive. Helena felt tongue-tied, deserted by wit when she needed it the most. Valamir went straight to the point. You needed an interpreter? Yes, Attila said. His eyes narrowed, never leaving her face. He landed with a smile. So, Helena, I think I'll abandon hope of having you as a wife. She held his gaze, but her fear dissipated, like rain falling on hot stones. Attila watched her, almost speaking to himself. It's for the best, I think. Despite my intention, I have broken you. I have no talent with sensitive women. Never have, never will. Valamir interrupted his soliloquy. Attila, your insights are intriguing, but you speak to my wife. Enough of this. What about the woman? I brought Helena to translate. Attila stood, his expression stern, but Valamir did not flinch from his glare. You are within your rights. I saw you together so clearly in love, and I felt sad. The gods are kind to you. And I'm grateful, Valamir said, but we are no closer to discovering why the woman was so far from Persia. Attila clasped his hands behind his back and drew himself to his full height, as if closing that part of him that had been awakened. When he spoke, his tone was pragmatic. Helena, I need your help. We captured a caravan. In my care, I have a mother and child. At his words, Helena felt as if a knife were at her throat, making breathing difficult. Her heart pounded, echoing her internal torment. Don't look at me like that. I haven't hurt them, Attila said. Considering the number of guards that she had, she's worth a large ransom. He laughed. Notice that I said had. 50 trained Persian soldiers are nothing to us. He paused, full of himself before remembering his present requirements. Unfortunately, she only speaks Persian. Why didn't you ask for a correct man? Helena asked. He's a peasant, not cultured. You are the correct choice. Perhaps the Persian bitch will have heard of your grandfather and condescend to speak. I'm beginning to tire of her. She's beautiful, but her arrogance curdles what should be sweet. I treated her kindly, but she has no gratitude. When she looks at us, she doesn't hide her scorn. What of the child? Helena asked. A little girl? She's of no account. But he's another brat. Speak to this Persian woman, Helena, and find out her name and, more importantly, who will pay her ransom. If she won't cooperate, tell her that I'll rape her until she learns to enjoy it. It'll take a long time, because every time she sees me, she scowls with disgust. You tell her that, she begins to bore me. And that won't take long. I'll sell her to the highest bidder, either here or in Ragluba's domain. And what of the child? What would you plan to do with her? Helena asked, her heart in her throat. Tell the mother that I'll sell the girl to a cheap brothel to be raised as a well-trained whore. Helena's voice was a rasp. You do that? Yes, but this child is brave despite her fear. If the mother doesn't cooperate, I'll let you have her. He gave Valamir a look of pure mischief. Haven't you always said, old friend, that you want no part of killing innocents? Well, accept the responsibility that goes with fine principles. Attila's charge weighed heavily on her soul, pushing her joy to the past. Understand, Helena said. I'll do my best. I knew that you would, once you understood how things were. Valamir interrupted. Helena, don't worry. I don't think Attila has any plans to sell the woman. Attila shouted, not hiding his chagrin. Valamir, it's true enough, isn't it? I saw how you looked at her. You may have plans for this Persian, but none of them include any other man. I won't have Helena upset. Attila folded his arms across his chest, his face brooding. I wanted her to be convincing. I won't allow anyone to frighten her. The situation overwhelmed her. She sat on the blue and red rug in front of Attila's chair, her head in her hands, staring at nothing. Breathing was an effort. Attila had offered her another child, as if she were a puppy, too charming to destroy. She thought only of Mikhail, remembering his shining face. If she had been alone, her grief would have found release with a long, keening cry. Instead, she was silent, her body as immobile as stone. Valamir and Attila stopped arguing. Come, Helena, Valamir said, offering his hand. As if it were a lifeline extending across that rocky chasm, she studied it, wanting to grab it and go home. She was tired of hiding and filled with a sudden need to face life as it was. Stay, Attila said. Break bread with me. We'll speak of other things. Helena made the journey back to herself. That would be good, Attila. I'll meet the woman after you tell me what you want to know. she said with measured tones. Surprised, Attila beamed at her like a teacher with a particularly apt student. His glance to Valamir was smug and full of self-congratulation. He clapped his hands loudly, and a slave appeared, bowing obsequiously. Attila barked orders in Hunnic. In moments they were served a hot beverage, bread, and meat. "I need your counsel," Attila said to Valamir. The Goth took a seat beside Helena, so close that they touched. Before, when they had been alone, his proximity brought her intense, almost succulent excitement. Now she felt numb. She picked at her food listlessly, oblivious to the men's discussion about routes and provisions for the tribe. Despite her intentions, the image of a vulnerable Persian woman with a child haunted her, echoing her all but immediately past. She delved into bitterness and condemned her love for Valamir. Her inner judge whispered insidiously that he rode with Huns, and that he shared in the blame for Mikkel. Still, she would not lie to herself any more. She began to accept her burden of the responsibility for her tragedy. Had she relied on Valamir's promise of protection, Mikkel might well be alive. When Kansber's house had been transformed into hell, she trusted her instinct first, forgetting all else. For too long she had been on her own, depending on her slender resources to survive, unable to believe in any man's word. As Valamir spoke earnestly to Attila, she watched him, enjoying the way the shafts of sunlight caught the planes of his face, his eyes so blue and clear, and loved him. What she felt for him was clean, beyond thought and words, and separate from her grief for Mikkel. He glanced at her and smiled. His eyes filled her face. Her lips softened into a wry grin, and the heaviness around her heart lifted. He was her talisman, keeping darkness at bay. Comforted, she reached up and touched his cheek. Attila's voice was harsh. "Shall I leave you alone?" Embarrassed, she blushed and studied the ground. Valamir's rebuttal was a short laugh, as if Attila had made a poor joke. She leaned on him, wanting to be away from this Hun with her probing, unsettling eyes. Valamir was blunt. "What of the Persian woman, Attila? What do you want Helena to ask?" Attila's eyes were bright and alert as a carnivore in pursuit. "I need information. Who is she? Where is she from? Why was she journeying to the Silk Route and away from the safety of her husband's harem? We found many fine things, but I think she's worth far more, Helena. Far more. Helena, you must tell her that resistance is useless. She will be better off cooperating while she still has skin on her face." Helena gagged, but stilled her reaction. She looked at Attila in the eye and resolved to protect this woman and her child from his abuse. "Where is she?" "Close by with my women. Are you ready?" "Yes." He clapped his hands loudly. A slave, the snooty Briton, answered the summons, his head touching the ground. Attila barked an order in Hunnic, and the Briton darted outside. Helena's fear settled in her stomach, twisting it. She was afraid for the woman. The logistics of negotiating ransom with the Persians would be difficult, if not impossible. Attila would have to send word to the woman's husband or father, and then wait. If the woman was noble and well connected at court, the Persians would send an army large enough to engulf Attila's command. Though his force of 2,000 was strong, they were far from home. In contrast, the Persians would have the resources of a nearby empire. Yet when the prisoner and the child were ushered inside, Helena felt chilled and repelled by the prisoner, hating the way she held the little girl's hand. She squeezed it tightly, oblivious to the child's look of pain. The Persian held her head high, almost regally. Her hair was dark, her eyes deep blue, and her profile was fine and well-proportioned. She looked first at Attila, then Valamir. As she looked first at Attila, then Valamir, her lips retracted into an arrogant sneer. The glance that she gave Helena was potent with contempt. At the child, no more than 6. Her hair was a mass of dark curls. Her black eyes, brimming with tears, pulled at Helena's heart, sparking her maternal hunger. Helena folded her arms across her cheek and decided to help the woman for the child's sake. In his cultured Greek, Attila initiated the conversation. "Sit with us," he said, motioning to the floor. The woman stared at him, making no effort to understand even his gesture. Helena translated. Hearing Persian, the woman's patina of arrogance vanished, revealing fear. Mystified by the reaction, Helena raised her eyebrows. Suspicion quickly followed bewilderment. She wondered what the woman had left behind in Persia. The prisoner regained her composure with a toss of her hair. "You speak Persian," she said. "That much is true. Please sit," Helena said, smiling with encouragement at the little girl. The child's face brightened. As the woman acquiesced, she pulled the child into her lap. Her knuckles were white as she grasped the small shoulders. "What is your name?" Helena asked. "Rodinia." "And the child?" "Her name is of no interest with you. Why do you travel with these savages? Your accent hints at better times." Helena wanted to slap her face hard enough to bring tears to those cold blue eyes. She resisted the impulse and kept her fists quiet at her sides. "This is my husband, a prince of the Ostrogoth nation, and the other is Attila, nephew of King Moglava of the Huns. Perhaps you have heard of them, of their people." "Barbarians! Who can remember them?" "Rodinia, you are in great danger. Is there someone who will ransom you?" The woman was silent. Helena pressed her, anxious to know more, deciding to breach her defenses through her pride. "Why are you so far from your husband's home? Did you run away or take a lover, perhaps?" Rodinia spat on the ground. "How dare you, you bitch! No better than a whore. I am of royal blood, and need not discuss my life with you." With a supple movement, Helena stood staring down at Rodinia. She was silent, her lips compressed. Yet when she spoke, her voice was even, not betraying the anger running through her body like a fresh, cleansing river. "You will beg my pardon this moment, then apologize to my husband Attila for your disrespect. If not, I'll hand you over to Attila and tell him that you refuse to cooperate. Already he has described his plans to peel the skin off your face, one layer at a time, slowly, with fine expertise." "I will not," Virginia said, gritting her teeth. Helena turned her back to the woman. "May you die well." Except for the child's rapid breathing, the tent was silent. Then Virginia whispered, "I am sorry." Helena faced her. "Say it in Greek, so they can understand." The woman bowed her head, attempting to hide the flush spreading across her face, her cheeks. "I don't know the words." "Then I will teach you." The woman repeated the phrase slowly. As the woman repeated the phrase slowly, Helena's eyes did not leave her face. "Good. I can proceed." "Virginia," she said, resuming her place next to Valamir. Attila watched, not masking his avid interest, but Helena did not acknowledge his curious eyes. She gestured toward him with her head. "He has guaranteed the safety of the child. He's promised her to me should you fail to cooperate. It's your choice." Virginia's eyes darkened with hate. "Bitch, you can't adopt her. She's a direct descendant of Darius, in line to the throne." Helena's laugh was curt and mocking. "You can't be serious. Even if she is royal blood, many others stand before her. That doesn't matter. She is who she is. No one lives forever. And are you her mother? Are you blind? Can't you see the resemblance?" "No, not at all. Perhaps she takes after her father." Again, Rodinia spat. "Cyrillic? I think not." "Cyrillic? I think not. You're lying. I can see it in your face. I can even smell your fear." "What are you running from, Rodinia? And whose child is this?" The woman's answer was a grieved silence, punctuated by venomous eyes. But Helena ignored her, and instead spoke to the child in a gentle voice. "Little one, I'm going to have Rodinia leave her for a while so that we can talk quietly together. Nothing will happen to her. I don't think she wants to be my friend." Rodinia interrupted. "I will not leave her." Helena dismissed her protest. "Attila, have this woman removed. For the child's sake, treat her gently, but watch her. Keep her from your women. She may be dangerous." Hands behind his back, Attila raised his one eyebrow and smiled, "As is your command." Determined to unravel the mysteries surrounding the little girl, Helena was in no mood for his teasing. Silently she watched as Attila clapped his hands, summoning the guards. Virginia would not let go of the child. The guards had to pry her fingers from her arms. As they let her out screaming, Helena touched the girl's hand. The girl's eyes were wet and her chin quivered. Helena offered her some bread. "Would you like some?" The child shook her head, but eyed the food with interest. "You're probably used to better," Helena said in a neutral voice. "What's your name?" "Altair." But that's a pretty name. Did Rodinia give it to you? No, my mother did. And where is she? Died in the fighting? Yesterday? Helena asked, her heart in her throat. No, when Rodinia came with the soldiers. Why did they kill your mother? Altair cried, I don't know. You must miss her very much, Helena said, pulling her close, holding her arms. The child sobbed. As Helena rocked her side to side, she quieted. Altair, where were you when the soldiers came? Ishtar. And his voice was a hoarse whisper. Ishtar. She repeated, stunned to hear the name of a religious center of Persia, the city her father had called home. She cleared her throat, trying to speak with a normal voice. I've heard of it. My grandfather had family there. We do too. We had a message from Mother's father that he was very sick and close to dying. She was very worried and asked permission to visit him. What happened? When we got there, his house was empty. No servants, no grandfather, just cousin Rodinia and the soldiers. They killed our guards. Altair began to sob. And then they hurt Mama before she died. She kept telling me not to watch. When cousin Rodinia saw, she slashed at the man's back with a knife and tried to make him get off Mother. He was bleeding everywhere, kneeling over Mama, and he took out his sword and put it into her stomach. She stopped moving, and her eyes just stared at me. Oh, Altair, Helena said, joining her tears. As the child continued inexorably in a high-pitched voice, Rodinia screamed at the soldiers and made them take me away. To take away the men who did these things to my mother. She told me that she was sad about what had happened, but she was lying. She didn't really care. I hate her. My mother didn't like her and said that she was jealous because my father didn't take her as a wife. The child paused, then pulled her head back so she could look at Helena's face. You can let that bad man hurt her, she said, glancing at Attila. I wouldn't mind. The child's anguish grated like shards of pottery across Helena's heart. She whispered, I'm so sorry, Altair, so very sorry. A bad man killed my little boy. It still hurts. Was it that one? Altair asked, gesturing slightly with her head towards Attila. No, another Hun. I hate him for what he did. You understand? You're nice. I want to stay with you. I like you too. Don't you think that your father might be looking for you? I don't know him well. Mother was not his only wife. Who is your father? Altair took a deep breath. He is the Emperor's brother. Suddenly, Helena understood the rationale for the child's abduction. Altair, someone will come for you. Soon you'll be home, safe and sound. You didn't tell me your name. Helena. That's not a Persian name. I know, but it's a good one. I'm tired. I miss my mother. Rest your head on my lap and try to sleep. Can I stay with you? For a little while, Altair. I'll make sure that Rodinia isn't near. Close your eyes while I talk with the men. As Helena related what she had learned to Attila, Altair drifted into sleep. Concluding, she leaned forward and spoke earnestly. Look for an imperial force of at least 1,500 men. With this outrage, Virginia struck at the heart of the empire. They will want vengeance. Attila's face was veiled, masked behind his thoughts. You've done well, remarkably well, Helena. It wasn't hard. If you take the time to listen, children are usually straightforward. She smiled mischievously at Attila. In Altair's mind, you are the bad man. I've been called worse, and what about you? Do you agree? Helena shook her head, not willing to be so easily baited. You've no sympathy for the Persian, after all. She's a woman, Attila asked. Helena raised her head, looking him in the eyes. She betrayed her family. She lured her cousin to a hard death. Virginia deserves whatever she gets. Attila's smile was rich with amusement. Spoken like a Hun. Valamir interrupted. Enough of this. If I'd known, I'd have insisted Karachipan take care of the questioning. It's been too much for Helena. But I tell you, Attila, that woman Virginia is a viper. And like all poisonous snakes, she should pay with her head. Attila stood. Don't attempt to shelter Helena from the world, Valamir. It can't be done. Before we finish with Rodinia, we need to know what was in her mind. Was there a plan to ransom the child? There's a story here, one that intrigues me. Helena was thoughtful. I don't understand the whole of it. I suspect a plot against the Emperor, treachery from within the palace walls. Someone has spun a fine web, but I don't think it's Rodinia. She's a player to be moved this way or that. No, we haven't seen the master of this plan. She'll tell us what she knows, don't worry. Not with Helena's help, Valamir said. I will lend you Karachipan, but if you promise that he'll be treated with respect. Helena continued on the same tangent as before. The Persians will reward you well for finding her. After they've finished with her, they'll know everything she has to tell. They have methods of torture that you cannot even imagine. Attila shook his head as if disappointed in his ablest pupil. Don't underestimate our inventiveness, Helena. She disagreed, but politely. They've had more than a millennium to perfect that art. Search the woman again, Valamir said. She's not frightened enough. She probably managed to keep a weapon. I'll personally oversee it. We did not make her strip. Now we should see her before his body was ruined by the Persians' knives. Attila paused. Yes, she'll learn more intimately about our hospitality. Uncomfortable, with a faraway look in her eyes, Helena forced herself to speak. I'd check her. She hesitated, deeply embarrassed. Go on, Attila said. Her face warmed, she whispered. Make sure that she has nothing in her private parts, Attila. With a woman of her kind, anything's possible. I admire the thoroughness of your thinking, Helena. She ignored the compliment. And Attila, don't tell her why you've been keeping her apart from the child. The uncertainty will prey on her, making it easier to discover the truth. Attila smiled with agreement. She felt bone-weary and unable to cope. She glanced at Attila and wanted to touch the child's smooth cheek, unblemished by time. Attila, did any of your wives bring children on this journey? No, except for my head wife, I only brought the younger ones. She wondered briefly how many wives he had, but kept to the task on hand. It's too bad for Attila. Being with other children might help her to forget. She wants to stay with me, but you have the guards to protect her more adequately. It will be done. Would you allow Karajapan to visit her in your women's quarters? Helena asked. Attila was silent while thinking. Perhaps, but only if you came with him. Helena cradled Attila in her arms. I'd be glad to accompany him, but for the child's sake it would be better for her to have 2 visits instead of 1. She speaks only Persian. As you know, it would help her if we came at different times. You can't imagine that Karajapan at his age is any danger to your wife's reputations? Attila cleared his throat. He may come alone, but must meet the girl outside in full view of the world, he said, smirking, teasing her with her own rules of decorum. Then it will be as you wish, Attila. May I take her to your wives now? I'll introduce you, he said, motioning for them to follow him to the smaller entrance at the back of the tent. As Helena stood, Attila awoke and began to cry. Helena smoothed her with a soft lullaby in Persian, and the child held her tightly. The thought of leaving her, Helena's throat caught, but she could not help being relieved. She did not want to become too close to the little girl, to care too much, only to lose her. Valamir waited outside while Helena followed Attila into his wife's tent. Its interior was luxurious, strewn with brightly colored rugs and soft fabrics. His wives were young. Only one was older than Helena, and all were very pretty. Yet as they listened to his instructions in Anak, they betrayed little curiosity about Helena or the child. Instead, they accepted his words with passive docility. Helena wondered if their unquestioning obedience bored him like a bland diet. Virginia was nowhere to be seen. Helena quietly explained the plans to Attila. I want to stay with you, the child said. Patiently, Helena told that the women would be kind, and if she needed her to ask for her by name. One of the wives, a dark-haired girl with clear brown eyes, came closer to Attila and smiled. From behind her back, she shyly pulled out a small doll. Tears in her eyes, Attira's face glowed as she clutched the small bundle of rags and wood to her heart. In Gothic, Helena stammered her thanks. She watched as the woman brought the child some warm food with a smile. When Helena joined Valamir outside, Karajapan had arrived, his face pinched with worry. In Attila's presence, he kept his eyes down and his hands at his sides, betraying not a hint of pride. The Hun regarded the Persian with bleak contempt. Remember, Attila, Valamir said, unafraid. Treat him with respect. He's my servant and a free man. Attila frowned and put his fist on his waist. Does he understand what I require? I've explained the situation. He's eager to help. That is good. As Helena and Valamir rode away on Hassan, Helena looked back at Karajapan, walking behind Attila toward the main tent. His shoulders were slumped, and his limp was more pronounced than ever. Will he be all right? She asked. He better be, Valamir growled. As the day faded into dusk, Karachapan had yet to return. Valamir kept Reese busy, tending the horses, checking the women's wagon's harness, but did not let him touch any weapons. The stars came out glittering in the sky. Should you go for Karachapan? Valamir asked. Should you go for Karachapan, Valamir? Helena asked over their evening meal. No, my place is with you. Attila will send him back and discover what he needs from the woman. Thinking of Attila's methods, Helena felt chills up and down her arms. After their meal, they lay together. Helena was afraid not of Valamir, but of the future the Persian girl might bring. As they made love, Helena held nothing back, giving herself to him as if it were the last time. So that's chapter 24. So, we'll see what happens next week. Hey, check out my book. You can buy your own copy. Tell people. Support me. And have a good week. Take care.